Today we will consider Christology. What is Christology? Christology belongs to one of the realms or spheres of theological studies that we have already discussed. These two spheres are what we have called theologia, theology, and economy. Who can explain the difference between theology and economy? Yes, please.
Theology has to deal more with ideas and our conceptions of God, weightier theological. Economy is how
God acts in the way. Yes, that's right. Yes. So last Tuesday we were studying the Trinitarian theology, the mystery of the Holy Trinity, and this topic belongs to theology. It goes up. It's about God in His existence. While economy is the way how God reveals Himself to us, how God acts in this world. And this realm belongs exactly to the topic that we are going to consider today. This topic has to do with the incarnation of God in the person of Jesus Christ. The way how this incarnation was perceived in the Eastern Christian tradition, in the Eastern Christianity. So, to this rubric of economy, the incarnation and the issue of the church, the topic of the church belong together. The church as a continuation of the incarnation, and the incarnation as God revealing Him to Himself, to human being through being born. Essentially, whatever we say about the incarnation, about Jesus Christ, constitutes Christology, constitutes the subject that I've indicated in the beginning. Christology is a logos, a word about Christ. In the Eastern Christian context, it has a very particular meaning. It has to answer three basic questions that emerged in the history of the Eastern Christian theology. These questions are: who is Jesus Christ? What is Jesus Christ? And how Christ's divinity and humanity became united. The thematology, the topics of modern Christology is much broader than these three questions. Nowadays, theologians discuss many issues regarding Jesus Christ, His personality, and the Christology in the modern sense has a much broader perspective. In the Eastern Christian tradition, originally, especially during the first millennium, those topics were limited to those three questions. Why such a reduction? Why such a narrowing of the scope of Christology? These questions were dictated by the challenges, by the doubts, by the questions that people posed regarding Christ. Because theology developed as a response to doubts, to questions, inquiries, problems, those problems defined the questions that the theology addressed historically. There is another reason why these questions became so important. This reason is because this question defined the soteriological framework of theology. Soteriological means comes from the word soteria, Greek word soteria, which means salvation. So Christology as much important in the theology as far as it addresses as far as it defines the way how people get saved in Jesus Christ. So theology was driven not by curiosity in the first millennium. It was driven by an interest in the way how people get saved. And these questions help explaining how people get saved in Jesus Christ. So a very narrow interest of salvation defined these three questions and reduced the interest of the church in who is Jesus Christ, in the question, who is Jesus Christ? Okay, is this understandable? So the questions regarding Christ, Jesus Christ, were a few. And it was a reduction of the possible interest of people in who is Jesus Christ, in the question, who is Jesus Christ. And this narrow list of the questions is defined by the problems that emerged in the history of the church and by the soteriological framework of theology. Yes, please.
So initially during that time, would the emphasis of these questions be like where and how people live like Christ?
Yes, how people can live in Christ and how the mechanism of salvation works. So it was largely about the mechanism of salvation. God became man. What does it mean? What implications does it have to human beings? How this affects the life of human beings? How they get saved from sin? These were the questions which the church tried to answer in the first millennium. Okay, is this clear? Good. You may ask, what is the difference between who and what? Why we speak about Jesus Christ as what? Why we ask this question? Was he a thing, or otherwise, why we ask what? It has to do with the interpretation of the natures of Jesus Christ. His humanity and his divinity constituted things to which people addressed with the question what. Him personally, his personality was the subject to which people address as who. Okay? Personality of Jesus Christ is one thing, is the subject, and the elements from which his nature was of which it consisted could be addressed with the question what. And then the ultimate question was how divinity and humanity got together, got united in the personality of Jesus. Okay. Again, the distinctions that we have explored last time when we were talking about the Trinity will help us to understand and to answer the questions, the three questions that I've just mentioned. These distinctions, as I mentioned last time, are universal and have been universally employed in the classical Eastern tradition. These are the distinctions between the common and particular natures and between the distinction and separation. Okay? Who can explain me what is the difference between common and particular generally? Regarding this table. Yes, please.
Regarding a table would be, common would be for a table as a whole, whereas particular refers to that specific one.
Right. That's correct. And can you exemplify the difference between distinction and separation using the example of this table? What do we distinguish and what do we separate in this way? Yes.
Wouldn't like if you compare it to other tables, distinction would be being able to say like these are two tables and they're different. But separation is like would be separating the nature of the tables. Like they're not separate because they're both.
Okay. Other idea? Yes, please.
The distinction is kind of this is what it is, separation is what it isn't.
Could be an answer. Another version? Yes, please.
The distinction refers to the features that distinguish it as a table as a whole, and then the separation. What particular table separate?
Like for instance,
Like
what feature is separated?
in this specific one,
Yeah.
like just the table.
Yeah.
From this table or any other table would be the color, the way the legs are shaped.
Right. That's right. Yes. We don't distinguish individual tables because we separate them because they exist separately from each other. Was this one?
It's not mine, but I can.
We don't distinguish between two tables, this one and this one, because they are different tables. We separate them. Okay. What we distinguish in this table is exactly features. This table being black and being quadrangular, being tall or being short. We cannot separate shortness of the table from its blackness. Okay, they belong to the same thing. That's why we distinguish these features. At the same time, we can separate, say, a leg of the table from the desk, right? Because they are not features, they are parts of the table. And the table has a composed nature. Its nature is not simple. As far as we can separate things, parts of the nature from each other, the nature is composed. God, in this regard, is not composed. You cannot take a part of God and separate another part of God from this part. The nature of God is simple, but it has features which are inseparable from each other, like God being omnipotent and God being omnipresent, being everywhere and being capable of doing everything. These two features are inseparable from each other. They are distinguishable. We can distinguish them theoretically in our mind, but they belong to the same simple nature of God. Okay? You wanted to ask something? Right. When we separate a part of the table, say, like if we take away the leg of the table, it is still a table because potentially it has this fullness of tableness. It is supposed, we know that a table is supposed to have a leg. Okay? It's like a human being, say, a human being without a leg or a hand, amputated leg or hand, is still a human being, right? That does not affect the nature of the thing. The criterion that helps us to identify what is the nature and what is a particular feature of an individual subject or object, like this table, is the common things that all the tables share, all the tables in the world share. Whatever is common for all individual tables belongs to the nature. Whatever is pertinent to this particular table is an individual feature and is not a part of the nature. Okay? This distinction will help us, it has already helped us to understand the Trinity, the way how the Trinity lives, and it will also help us understanding or answering the three questions regarding Christ that I mentioned earlier. Okay? Just anticipating what we will be discussing, I could say that when we speak about Christ, his subject, what we address as who is Jesus Christ, is singular, is unique. It is the hypostasis, the individual being of Jesus Christ. While his natures, him being God and being man, his humanity and his divinity are natures which he shares with shares his divine nature with the Father and with the Holy Spirit, and he shares his human nature with us. Okay? That's why when we ask the question, what is Christ? The answer is his natures, his divinity and his humanity. Okay? Because they share the same features as all our humans do. Okay? We'll come back to this later. This is just to illustrate how these distinctions work in Christology, in the traditional Eastern theology about Jesus Christ. As regards this distinction, between distinction and separation, the difference between distinction and separation, we do not separate divinity from humanity in Jesus Christ. We only distinguish them. They are not two things that can be taken away from each other. They exist together as one thing. We only distinguish them. That's why this differentiation between distinction and separation is helpful to understand the connection. Okay? Yes, please.
So between common and particular and then separation, they're slightly synonymous, but not entirely.
They are not entirely, because even between common and particular, we distinguish. We do not separate them. Say, we do not separate tableness and a particular table. We cannot imagine them being separately from each other. Okay, you cannot imagine a thing called tableness. Okay, you can only imagine a particular table which shares the same features with all other tables in the world. That's why we distinguish between tableness and a particular table, but we do not separate them. At the same time, we separate between two particular tables. Okay? They are different things. We don't distinguish them. They are two different things. We separate them. Okay? Is this clear? These are kind of the alphabet of the logic that students in the universities studied for centuries until the modern times. It was a basic part of their curriculum. And it's an opportunity for us to learn some elements of this logic, which, as I mentioned, goes back to Aristotle and was perfected by Neoplatonic philosophy. It has become an introduction of Neoplatonic philosophy, which all students studied from the late antiquity through the beginning of the modern era. Okay. When we study what the theologians wrote about Jesus Christ in the first millennium, we can identify a common pattern in their writing. This pattern can be analyzed in 3 steps, can be presented as 3 steps. They began with affirming the unity of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is a real being, first of all. Jesus Christ is not an idea. Jesus Christ is not a concept. Even though the personality of Jesus Christ has been conceptualized, has been analyzed thoroughly, and a huge volume of theological works, treatises, has been produced describing who is Jesus Christ and what is Jesus Christ. A huge analysis has been done. Yet, for the theology of the Church, Jesus Christ is not a bunch of concepts. He is an alive being, a personality, and this is a starting point, a departure point for any theological analysis about who and what is Jesus Christ. Okay? Then, the next step in the analysis of what and who is Jesus Christ is the differentiation or producing understanding, comprehending distinctions within the singular being of Jesus Christ. All those distinctions between humanity and divinity go here to the second step. And at the third stage of any analysis, any theological analysis of Jesus Christ, is a reaffirmation, reconfirmation that Jesus Christ is indeed one being. It somehow reflects the Hegelian dialectic. Have you heard about the Hegelian dialectic? It's the one that goes back to Hegel, a German philosopher in the beginning of the 19th century. Have you heard about synthesis, thesis, or thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? Which is actually the basis of the Hegelian. Right? Well, this is a kind of universal method of perception, of the perception of reality, when people begin with affirming a thesis, a point, then they go to conclude that there is also an antithesis, something that goes opposite to the original thesis in our perception of the reality. Say, people may get disappointed with humankind and may begin thinking that all humans are bad, and people may turn misanthropic. And then they begin with the affirmation as they go that all people are good as a thesis. Then antithesis, all people are bad. And eventually, as they grow, as they become adults, they realize that it is not so simple. People are neither good nor bad. They are complex. And they arrive at a synthesis in their perception of humanity, of the humankind. And it applies to many domains of human knowledge. The same dialectics can be applicable to answer the questions who and what is Jesus Christ. So the initial, the departing point of this dialectics is that Christ is one single being. The second point is Christ is a variety of actually two natures and a variety of qualities, of different energies, activities, of different features. And eventually, the unity of Jesus Christ and the the bipolar character of his nature comes to the synthesis that ascribes to Christ's divinity some human features and ascribes to Christ's humanity some divine features. So that people may say that God has died, or that a human being, man Jesus Christ, has performed miracles, something that only God does. This intersection, cross-section of features, of qualities, has been called in theology communicatio idiomatum, the exchange of qualities, or communication of qualities, when divine properties are ascribed to the human side of Jesus Christ, and his human properties are ascribed to his divine side. This constitutes a sort of synthesis, a Christological synthesis. Okay? So this is a universal pattern. How many theologians, authors in the past of the church describe and perceive who and what is Jesus Christ? Okay? Yes, please.
So it goes from, to start off with, say, Christ is real. Then
Is a real one thing.
a real one.
Yeah. He is an alive being, a one single alive being. we cannot cut him into pieces. As we do, we cut him into pieces in a sense when we try to analyze who and what he is.
Which is the distinction part?
Which is the second part, exactly. And then we put those pieces together again. Well, of course, these pieces are intellectual. These are our concepts. We put them together and we realize the complexity, the synthetic character on the one hand, and still his unity on the other hand.
So we go from Jesus as one being to his humanity, divinity, and then we create a synthesis in which we combine the humanity.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, please.
So he's one being, but in the same.
He is both God and man. Yes. And being God and man, he is one being. So this is the commonest pattern of perception of Jesus Christ in the Eastern Christian tradition. This pattern has been produced in the Eastern Christian tradition and then disseminated worldwide. It has become a general kind of classical theological pattern for Catholic theology, Protestant theology, and originally it was born in the. Okay. Is this clear, guys? Have you heard something like that before? No. Okay. An example is the Gospels, the New Testament. That's exactly how Jesus Christ is presented in the New Testament. When we take the Synoptic Gospels, what is the Synoptic Gospels? Yes.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
No, only three of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Besides John.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Why they are synoptic? Yes.
Because they're all basically the most similar of the three,
Mm-hmm.
and then John came later.
Exactly. And John gives a different perspective. The first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, they consider Jesus Christ exactly as one single alive being. As a certain Jesus who lived among the Jews in Jerusalem, in Nazareth, and in Palestine, and conversed, had conversations, performed different actions, and so forth. He was a one single personality from the synoptic perspective, which exactly fits the first stage of the perception of Jesus Christ in his unity. John gives a different perspective. He goes further than the synoptics, and he affirms a divine character of Jesus Christ, that he is not just what we can see with our eyes. He is much more than we can see. He is God, who is unseeable. Okay? And this gives us a distinction between what John makes a distinction between the Logos, the Word, the divine side of Jesus Christ, and his human side, which John describes as sarx, the Greek word for flesh. John makes this radical counterposition between the Logos and sarx, because in his time they represented two poles, two margins of perception. Logos was something absolutely spiritual, divine, out of this world. Sarx was an amalgam, a quintessence of everything which is bodily, fleshy, earthly. Okay? So John picks up these two terms, notions, logos and sarx, in order to emphasize how different, how remote are the things, elements which are combined in Jesus Christ. And thus he stresses the distinction, the difference between those two elements in Jesus Christ. And again, and he makes this distinction at the very beginning of his gospel in the first chapter. And then in the end of the gospel, he comes to reaffirm the unity of Jesus Christ. He describes how Jesus Christ revealed himself, appeared to the disciples, to the 7 disciples after his resurrection, how they didn't recognize him, but still he was the same one single being, Jesus Christ. So a sort of synthetic conclusion of John's Christology. When we go further in the centuries, we discern the same pattern in other writers. One of the earliest Christian writers who lived in the 2nd century, Ignatius of Antioch in Syria and Melito of Sardis in Asia Minor, they addressed the same mystery of Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus Christ? Trying to describe who is Jesus Christ. The Christological language, Christological theology was rudimental, was very primitive at the time, was not well elaborated. And they tried to use the language of their time to describe who is Jesus Christ. And for Melito, for instance, he wrote about Jesus Christ as the mystery of Pascha. What is Pascha? Easter, yes. It's actually, you know this because it is in Russian, but it is originally a Greek word. Melito derived it from the word to suffer, Pascha. And even though the Easter, the original Jewish Pesach, means Exodus, the exit of Jews from Egypt. So Melito in Greek wrote about the Pascha, he used the word actually, and he wrote about Jesus Christ as the Easter, the Pascha, and about his incarnation as the mystery of the Pascha. He also made a distinction between different aspects of this mystery. He wrote that this mystery, Jesus Christ, is both new and ancient. It is eternal and temporarily existent. It is mortal and immortal. So he generalizes the components, the elements that became united in Jesus Christ. And he concludes that these two distinct elements came together and influenced each other in the way that he, for instance, very boldly wrote about the death of God, probably the first author before postmodernism who wrote about the death of God. In the 60s, 1960s, there was a big fuss about the death of God, which was proclaimed by postmodern thinkers, but much before them, in the 2nd century, Melito did the same for different reasons, though. For him, the death of God didn't mean that God died. It meant that because God united with man in the person of Jesus Christ and was crucified on the cross, we can say that it is not only humanity which was crucified, suffered, and died. It is also divinity, because they were intrinsically connected. Okay. I will ask you, what does the death of God means in the early century? I hope you will answer me in this way. Another theologian who lived in the 2nd century, his name was Irenaeus of Lyon. He was probably the greatest theologian before the 4th century, before the era of Constantine. He was Greek originally, his language was Greek, but he moved to the west, to Gaul, now France, and became a bishop in Lyon. Still there is a city of Lyon in France. And he developed a sophisticated Christology as well, following the same pattern. He began by affirming that Jesus is one and the same. It has become a formula, a Christological formula, a classical one accepted by all the churches, that Christ is one and the same. In Greek it is called pisteautos, one and the same. At the same time, this one and the same features two sides. Irenaeus called one side allos and the other side allon. These are two Greek pronouns. One means the other in a masculine gender, like he, and the other one, alon, means it, the neutral gender in Greek. Okay, it. So Christ is both he and it. He applies to his personality. It applies to two components of which he consists. These two components are divinity and humanity. So divinity and humanity are it in Christ, or alone. His personality, his subject is he. And this subject is God. It is the second hypostasis of the Trinity. It is the Son of God. Okay? So, Irenaeus distinguished between he and it in Christ, thus answering the question, who and what is Christ? Who? The answer to who is the Son of God. The answer to what is humanity and divinity. Okay? Is this clear? And yes, please.
Oh, I was just wondering, back to like the death of God. I just wanted to clarify. So, if like why people were saying that is because God became president where he could die. Is that why?
Yeah. Yes. God became man, and this synthesis, combination of Godhead and humanity, was called Jesus Christ, the personality of Jesus Christ. And because this personality combined divinity and humanity, and still it was one single personality, this personality died on the cross. That's why whatever happened to him as a single, unique personality applies to both divinity and humanity. It doesn't mean that the divinity as such dies. Divinity, God cannot die. But because God united with humanity in the person of Jesus Christ, and this particular person died, we can say that God also died, because Jesus Christ was God. Yes?
Did people ever interpret this as like God giving up on humanity?
Well, yes, it is possible to interpret like this. It has been interpreted as the divine self emptying, God emptying himself, God denying himself, his Godhead, not denying humankind, okay, in the crucifixion on the cross, but God gave up on himself, on Godhead, and this has been called kenosis, self-emptying, that God actually went against his own Godhead. He died on the cross in the person of Jesus Christ in order to save humankind, and this was not giving up with humankind, it was giving up with God. Okay? Yes.
I'm just curious then, they obviously don't consider God dead, but consider it to have at all times. So how then does he die and use the Godhead if at the same time they're saying he exists indefinitely?
Yeah. Well, the death of Jesus Christ was a separation of Jesus' human soul from his human body. The death of every person is a separation of soul from body. That's the basic Christian belief. So what happened to Jesus Christ when he died? His body his soul separated from his body. But the divinity stayed with both body and soul. That is the belief of the Eastern Church. And the same is the belief of the Western Church. So the divinity stayed with both soul and body. And when the resurrection happened, then the body and soul reconnected with each other. Still, they were human body and soul, and they were still connected with God. So because they were connected with God, they were able to reconnect with each other, body and soul, and And that's how the resurrection happened. That is the mechanism as it was described in the theology. And this mechanism can be presented as death of God because it was exactly the personality, single personality of Jesus Christ who died. Saying this, and this personality was an intrinsic part of this personality was the divinity of God. So one thing is the well, we can explain this in this way that God has died as we need to be. But essentially it means that God never dies, but He allowed this separation of body and soul to happen in Jesus.
So should the resurrection not have occurred, would then there still be a split?
Yeah.
That would have a different explanation, but
Yeah.
because of the resurrection,
Yeah.
we're able to split.
Yeah, exactly. And the resurrection happened because still with the body and soul, divinity was coming. And that's how the salvation of people happened, according to the belief of the church, that when the soul of the human soul of Jesus Christ went to the Hades, to the hell, divinity was with it. And it was described in the Eastern poetry like, fishing. When you throw an angle to the sea and you put some piece of food, right, on the anchor, and then the fish takes it, swallows it, and gets caught. That's exactly how the Hades was caught in Christian poetry. That the body of Jesus Christ became, and the human soul of Jesus Christ became this small piece of food that the Hades, which is presented sometimes as a big fish, swallowed and got caught. And the divinity appeared within it and destroyed it. That's a poetic explanation of the resurrection and the effects of the resurrection. Any other question? Okay. I mentioned in the beginning that the soteriological rationale constitutes the framework of all these ideas, of all these things, thinking. Soteriology means relevant to the salvation. It comes from the Greek word soteria. I forgot my marker. This one. Greek word soteria means salvation, and hence is soteriology, everything relevant to salvation. So the logic of salvation, whatever is relevant to the salvation of humankind, constitutes the general framework of any theological thinking about God. This is the big issue of soteriology, the way how people are saved, and not just people, but the entire world. Soteriology includes not just salvation of individual people, it includes salvation of the entire universe. And this is a feature particularly of Ignatius, of Irenaeus of Lyon. Here, he is speaking about recapitulatio, which is the reconciliation of the entire universe, of the entire cosmos, in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, when God became man, God embraced not just human beings, not just humanity. God embraced the entire nature, the entire universe. And the entire universe became reconciled in God. This is an important part of what we call now eco-theology, theology about the environment, about the world that surrounds us. And the answer of this theologian in the 2nd century was that it's not just human beings who are valuable to God, who need reconciliation with God, it's the entire universe. And the entire universe in this recapitulatio goes here to the soteriological frame. It requires, it needs salvation, just as human beings. Okay? And this problem of the salvation is solved through the incarnation in Christology. And this answer, the incarnation, constitutes, it leads to solve, it leads to the revelation of who is God. So people were not so much, the early Christians were, and in the East, Christians in the East, they were not so much curious about who is God. They were interested in answering the question, who is Christ? And this answer, who is Christ and what is Christ, led them to answering the question, who is God? So the thinking of the early Christian was what we call Christocentric. Christ, Jesus Christ, personality of Jesus Christ is in the center of this thinking. It gives an answer to the problem of God, and it also belongs to the wider framework of soteriology, thinking about how to save humankind and how to save the entire world, the entire universe. Okay?
So that's Christology.
That is Christology. This is Christology. Christology is about who and what is Jesus Christ. And it is an answer to the question how the world is saved. And it also reveals who is God.
So who and what are Jesus and God,
Yeah.
and how does
Humanity and the entire universe. And also,
I thought soteriology was the
yes, exactly. That is soteriology. And also, Christology reveals who is God.
But Christology, but not soteriology, involves the salvation of humanity.
Soteriology is about salvation of humanity and of the universe. That is soteriology. Christology is about how God became man, how the incarnation happened, and the Trinitarian theology about who is God. So these three kind of topics are connected to each other. These were the main theological topics of the first millennium in the Christian. And that's how they are related to each other. Okay? Let us have a brief look at the controversy which we have already considered. This is the Arian controversy, which happened in the 4th century. And it was about what? Who remembers? This slide is actually from our previous lecture.
Yeah. Well, one was condemned for he forgot what heresy.
Yeah, say
Heresy.
heresy. Yeah. How this heresy was called? After his name. Yes.
Arian
Arianism. Yes.
Yeah.
This is from his name, Arius.
had the idea that Christ was being God or Savior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, wonderful. Yes, exactly. Christ for him. Yes.
I was just gonna add that like there was time where there
Mhm.
was like where there wasn't son, there was
Exactly.
father.
Exactly.
Before
Athanasius. Yeah.
is like they were always been together.
Yes, there was no time when there was no sun. Yes, that's right. So for Arius, Jesus Christ was just a creature. He was created, he has been created by the Father. And Christ is the most perfect creature of the Father, but still he is a creature. He is not God. For Athanasius, Christ is God. He is consubstantial with the Father. What does consubstantial mean?
The same ring.
You can say it more literally. Yes.
Like they're one and the same, just like as.
Entity, how do you call this entity? Yes? Yes. The same substance or essence. Yeah. That's substantial, yes.
Isn't it also like they created the world together?
Yes, exactly. Yes. For Arius, first the Father created the Son, and then through the Son, the Father created the world. For Athanasius, the Father and the Son who are eternally together. They created together the world, and they created the time, actually, in which their world belongs. And themselves, the Father and the Son, are outside time and creation, outside the created world.
Athanasius or Arius or both?
Well, that was the point of Athanasius. And this point was accepted by the church, the entire church, and constitutes now a common basis for every Christian church.
Is there a difference between consubstantial and homoousian?
Exactly. Consubstantial is the Latin word for the Greek homousios, which means the same, being of the same essence, being of the same nature. Yes?
I thought that the Arius one was more accepted. Is it the
No, he was condemned.
Because he created the Athanasius to like basically show that it was wrong and the Arius was right. Is that how?
Well, Arius argued that he's right and Athanasius was wrong, and Athanasius argued that Athanasius is right and Arius wrong. They were actually antagonists. They argued against each other, and the church eventually decided that Athanasius was right and Arius was wrong. Yes.
But I thought politicians supported Arius because he
Yes.
believed in the hierarchy.
Yeah. Well, Athanasius was higher than Arius. Arius was just a priest in the same diocese where Athanasius was a bishop. But the politicians, including Constantine himself, supported more Arius. And the reason was that the Arian hierarchical structure of the divine being fitted the political structure of the Roman Empire. With the Father on the top, the Father did not share his divinity, his supreme status with the Son and with the Holy Spirit and other creatures, okay? Other creation. This fitted well the political thinking of the Roman emperors, who also did not want to share their power with anyone. That's why they eventually decided to support Arius. But the church decided that it was still wrong, and at the councils, the first ecumenical council and second ecumenical councils, the church proclaimed the teaching about the equality of the Father and the Son in their divine nature, in their divine essence. Okay? Despite the political experience of the time. Okay? The conversation, the argument between Athanasius and Arius was not just about who is the Father and who is the Son. It had the same framework of soteriology and and Christology. So the discussion about who is the Father and who is the Son belongs here. But what Arius and Athanasius disagreed upon fundamentally belonged to here, to the interpretation of who is Jesus Christ, and to here how we get saved in Jesus Christ. The argument of Arius was that Jesus Christ is just a creature, the most perfect, but still a creature of the Father. He is below the Father. Athanasius argued that no, that the Son is equal to the Father, and this is not just because it is so, but because this is the only condition for us and for the entire world to be saved. If Jesus Christ is just a creature, not God, then in the incarnation, human beings, human nature, got united with their creative nature, not with God. God is still above this unity of humanity and Jesus Christ. In Christ then, if Arius is right, then in God, one creature united with another creature, one created thing united with another created thing. And this means that the human nature, which is corrupted, which is subject to sin, cannot be saved from being in touch with divinity. Athanasius argued that the salvation is possible only because the created human nature becomes connected, gets in touch with the divinity, and the divinity saves the human nature. If it is not divinity but another created nature, like Jesus Christ, who was created according to Arius, unites himself with the humankind, then the humankind is not beneficial. It's just like, put one corrupted thing to another corrupted. It's like you can, in the modern times, put it in this way. In order to lighten a bulb, say, you need to plug the bulb into the socket. If there is no currency there, it will not. The bulb will not shine. It's like to put one thing to another thing of the same nature. This will not work. Something special, something different from this nature, which needs to be saved, need to be on the other side. So for the human beings to be saved through the incarnation, on the other side of the incarnation, there should be God, not another creature. So that was actually the difference between Arius and Athanasius. Okay?
So we're able to be saved according to Athanasius because Christ is both divine and human.
Exactly.
And because is it through that interaction that we're saved?
True.
So I get that Christ is divine and human, but how exactly is that?
Yes, they didn't explore how exactly the humanity and divinity got united. What is the mode of unity? But for Athanasius, what was important for Athanasius that the humanity got in touch with the divinity, got connected with the divinity. For Arius, there is still a wall between the divinity, the uncreated God, and created world. Because Jesus Christ, for Arius, belongs to the created world. Jesus Christ is not a part of the divine being. And that's why the mediator of Jesus Christ does not lead human beings to God. The mediator, Jesus Christ, keeps human beings in the realm of the created, of the created world. If we accept Arius.
So because when Arius, Christ is not the one that was created?
Yeah, exactly. So for Athanasius, this is still Athanasius, his theology had several implications. First, as regarding the Trinity, because we need salvation, because salvation should be real, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Jesus Christ is God, not just it. That's why Athanasius arrived at this term consubstantial, that the Son is consubstantial, of the same essence with the Father. Of the same essence means he is God as well as the Father is the God. Okay? In the terms of soteriology, Athanasius arrives at the concept of theosis, divinization, that human beings are not just saved from sin. God divinized. Human beings can become gods. This idea was not unknown to the ancient world. We know how some human beings in the ancient world were regarded as gods. Like who?
Yes.
Who?
Roman emperors.
Exactly. Roman emperors were regarded gods. not because they purify themselves, made something that made them gods, just because they were elected emperors, by the virtue of being emperors. Also for the Neoplatonic philosophy, it was quite a common idea that human beings can become divinized. For the Neoplatonics, though, it was not a political virtue. They can be divinized not because they are elected or become, for different reasons, emperors, but because they purify their souls. And the Christians accepted this idea, and for the Christians, this idea turned the explanation of the possibility why human beings can become gods was different than Neoplatonic. For the Neoplatonists, a human being could contemplate God through philosophy, through the virtuous life, and eventually arrive at the point of being united with God through contemplation, through intellectual effort. Okay? For the Christians, this is possible not through the intellectual effort, but because of the incarnation. Because humanity became united to divinity in Jesus Christ, humanity can accept some qualities, can adopt some qualities of the divine. As God can die on the cross, in the same way humans can become gods through the incarnation. Okay? That was the idea of Athanasius. And this is a kind of an important feature of the Eastern Christian tradition. Still, in the Eastern Christian tradition, people speak about the theosis, divinization, accepting, adopting divine qualities. Hence is, for instance, a veneration of relics in the Eastern Christian and in the Western, in the Catholic tradition. But this, in the West, in the Catholic tradition, this idea has been somehow marginalized. It is still central to the Eastern Christianity. And for instance, in the Eastern Christian, people believe that some relics of the same people remain intact. They don't decay. This is because of this divinization that happens to human beings.
The same kind of relics as in the Catholic Church, where objects touch or body parts?
Yes, it is a kind of the Catholic tradition of veneration of relics has to do with this theology of divinization, but somehow this theology has been forgotten as an explanation of why the relics are venerated. But this tradition is still well remembered in the East and provides an explanation of the veneration of relics in the East. Okay. And what is important about Athanasius is that he is speaking about the unity of the Logos and Sarx, flesh, in Jesus Christ. Remember, this language goes back to John, the evangelist. In the Gospel, John speaks about the Logos who became Sarx, flesh. And Athanasius picks up this language and applies it. This language, though, on the one hand, this language makes emphasis on the unity of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is one single being. So by speaking about human nature in Jesus Christ as just sarx, as just flesh, as just body, the theologians in this way emphasize Christ's divine side and the unity of the divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ. At the same time, it led to anthropological minimalism, to reducing the humanity of Jesus Christ. This paradigm, theological paradigm, that considers, that stresses unity of divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ on the one hand, and diminishes the human component of Jesus Christ, developed particularly in Alexandria, in Egypt. And it's a feature of the Alexandrian theology. And it led to some marginal, radical ideas that excluded from Jesus Christ some parts of his humanity. Like, for instance, in the version of a theologian whose name was Apollinaris of Laodicea. Laodicea is Asia Minor, modern Turkey, who said that, insisted that Jesus Christ was not a complete human personality, was not a complete human being. He lacked a part, and this part was quite important. This part is called nous. The Greek word nous means mind or means soul. It's a very broad term which includes more than a lot of modern meanings. So it's an intellect, but it's everything which is not visible in the human being, like soul, but still consists an important part of the human nature according to the Christian perception. But yes, Jesus missed it, and in Jesus Christ, nous was replaced by logos, by the divine logos.
What do you mean by missed? Does it mean lacks it, or?
It was not there. It was absent. It was substituted by the logos, by the divine part. So you can say that in Jesus Christ, say the divinity and humanity came together, got united into one being. And for Apollinarius, one part of the humanity was replaced by divinity. And this part is called nous. This part, which belongs to every human being has it as a part of its nature, was missing in Jesus Christ. And it was replaced by the divine logos. That was a problem for theology, and this problem was indicated by the Cappadocians. The Cappadocians who are depicted on this item: Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, and there is a lady, she's a sister of Basil. Yes, please.
I just wanted to clarify. So nous is like the soul, like human soul. Is that what it is?
Yeah, you can call it soul. Because the Greek word nous was different from whatever categories you apply now. It was comprehensive of many things that we call now soul, mind, intellect, emotions.
So you're saying that Jesus wasn't like emotional and
Well, he didn't say that, but he implied that Jesus Christ, the humanity of Jesus Christ was passive, was not active, did not have its own kind of motion. The emotional side of the human nature at that time was expressed in terms of motion. So a person who is emotional, that person was called kind of motional. Hence, its emotion. Actually, even the etymology of the word emotion comes from the word movement, motion. So for the perception of a human being at the time included the concept of human kind of emotions, human intellect, human soul, and all these sides, all these elements of the human personality were called nous. Sometimes this word is translated as mind, but this translation is narrowing the original meaning. Okay. So the Cappadocians, they perfected the original Athanasian concept of the Trinity. They actually applied to the Trinity the terms hypostasis. And they suggested calling the persons of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as hypostasis. That means particular being. Again, their particularity does not mean that they are separate beings. They are just distinguished within the same Trinity. So those three particularities in the Trinity are distinguished, not separated. And that is the difference between us. Say, we are three, we can be three personalities, right? Three persons. But we are separate beings. We are not distinguished, distinct beings, right? We are separate. In the Trinity, the three particularities, hypostasis, constitute one nature, one essence. That is the difference between three people and the Trinity in God. Okay? That was the idea which was introduced by the Cappadocians in the first century. Is this clear? That's how the differentiation between distinction and separation helps. Okay? Is this clear? Second, regarding the soteriology, the Cappadocians said that Apollinaris was wrong because if he is right, if Jesus Christ lose a part of his nature, of his human nature, then this part of the human nature remains outside of the salvation because it is not in touch with the divinity. Still, the touch with the divinity is the must for the salvation of everything which requires salvation. Because only one part of the human nature, therefore, this part, is in touch with divinity. Only this part gets saved. The part which is missing in Apollinaris, the mind, nous, is not here because it is replaced by the logos. It is outside. Therefore, in every human being, this part remains unsaved. And the Cappadocians promulgated the formula that only that part of the human nature is saved which belongs to Jesus, to the humanity of Jesus Christ, and which therefore is in touch with the divinity. For any part of the human nature to be saved, it must be in touch with the divinity through the incarnation and the personality of Jesus. Okay? Is this clear? You see, somehow this is quite schematic. All those schemes, they are very speculative, right? And they are. So that is the early Byzantine scholasticism, if you want, which emerged much before the Western scholasticism appeared in the Middle Ages. And that's these are the basic things concerning the interpretation of theological doctrine. The Cappadocians, instead of the paradigm logos sarx, which was articulated by Athanasius, they introduced the idea, the paradigm of logos anthropos. Which means, what anthropos means? Yes. Mm-hmm. A man, a person, a human being. It's a human being. It's gender neutral. In Greek, there is another word for a man, like a male, an individual, anir. Anthropos means a gender neutral human being. So the Cappadocians insisted that Jesus Christ is a whole human being who got united with God. That's why the whole human being gets access to salvation. And this paradigm developed primarily in Antioch, in Syria. Nowadays, it's a part of Turkey. It's still southeastern Turkey, Antioch. In Antioch was a center of the Middle East, was a capital of the Middle East at the time. And Antioch was a center also of studies of science, of scholarship, and of theology. And in Antioch, this paradigm, logos anthropos, received prominence. And it was different from the paradigm logos sarx, which reduced the human nature just to the body, okay, And it developed where? In Alexandria, in Egypt. So Logos starts in Alexandria, in Egypt. Logos Anthropos, more holistic approach to the human being in Jesus Christ, in Antioch, in Syria. Okay? Is this clear? I will skip. The paradigm Logos Anthropos, the Logos man, which means that a human being, a whole human being of Jesus Christ, got united with God, was ambivalent. Could be interpreted in two ways. It could be interpreted in the sense that the entire humanity, entire human nature, got united with God in Jesus Christ. It could also mean that an individual human being named Jesus got united with God in Jesus Christ. These were two different things, and these two different things had two different explanations. Actually, the Antiochian theology insisted that it's not just humanity, but an individual being, human being named Jesus, got united with God in Jesus Christ. There were essentially two subjects, two personalities. One personality, Jesus, born from Mary, and another personality, the Son of God, who is born from the Father. They came together and united into one single being, which only appeared as a symbol. And this appearance, the single appearance of Jesus Christ, they called prosopon, or person. This is the word. It's not indicated here. Prosopon. So prosopon was, or the person was just an appearance, common appearance of Godhead, of the God, and of the man, under the same as a single appearance. But in fact, in reality, they were two subjects, two self-consciousness, two self-awarenesses, two I. Jesus Christ would say, according to this interpretation, two times I. I as Son of God, and I as Son of Mary. This is schizophrenic. This is a typical case of schizophrenia. And that's how Christ was presented as a kind of a misinterpretation of the unity. And this constituted the essence of historianism. We have already studied with the historians, right? What do you know about this? Where did it spread? Yes.
So it ended up being just the Church of the East.
Yes,
correct.
Exactly. It's the Church of the East. Yes. The argument against Nestorianism was that yes, the humanity of Jesus Christ was full, but it was not a subject of a man, Jesus, who united with the divinity. It was the entire humankind, but not an individual human who united with Jesus. And this also had a soteriological implication, because if it is just an individual person, Jesus Christ, Jesus, who united with God in Jesus Christ, then it is only this individual human being is saved. The rest of the people, the rest of the humankind, remain outside the salvation. In order everyone to get access to the divinity through the Jesus Christ, it should be just nature not an individual hypostasis, not an individual subject of Jesus Christ to be united with the divinity of Jesus Christ. The entire humankind. So that we who share the same nature, by participating in this nature, which had become united with God in Jesus Christ, we participate in this nature, which is united with God in Jesus Christ, and therefore we get access to the salvation. If it is only an individual human being who is united with God, then the salvation stays only with this individual human being. Last lecture, we finished with the conversation about Nestorianism, the Nestorian theology, which, as many of you have widely indicated in the midterm writings, is about imagining Jesus Christ as two subjects covering under the same appearance or the same person. In opposition to Nestorianism, to the theology produced by the Antiochian theologians, a prominent figure in the Eastern theology who lived in Alexandria, whose name was Cyril, produced an alternative Christology, which became normative for the Christian East. So Cyril of Alexandria, this is his item. He is, sorry about this. He developed his theology, his concept of Jesus Christ in counterposition to Nestorius. And his theology about Jesus Christ became normative for the Eastern Christianity. He's actually the central figure in the Eastern Christian understanding of who and what is Jesus Christ. His Christology can be amalgamated in the phrase Logos Sarx. Who can explain what that means? Logos Sarx. Yes, please.
Sarx is the flesh.
It's flesh.
Part that's referring to the humanity of
Exactly.
Jesus, and logos is the
Exactly. Yes, that's right. And this Christology goes back to Athanasius of Alexandria. Remember, Athanasius, who lived 2 generations before Cyril. Athanasius was much 2 generations older than Cyril. He lived in the same place in Alexandria in Egypt. And he began speaking in the terms of Logos Sarx about Jesus Christ. So Cyril of Alexandria essentially continued the theology of Athanasius, and he continued this in order to rebuke the theology of the bishop in Constantinople, Nestorius. Cyril of Alexandria played a key role in the Third Ecumenical Council, which was held in Ephesus in the year 431. It is also known as the Third Ecumenical Council. Ephesus was a big city in the antiquity, located not far from Constantinople. Nowadays it takes from 1 to 2 hours by car from Constantinople, from Istanbul to get to Ephesus. There are some ruins remaining at that place nowadays. So Cyril played a key role at this council, and this council became important in rebuking Nestorian. And this council also was accepted commonly in the East and in the West. So the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches, they actually uphold this council together with the Eastern Church. The key features of the Logos Sarx Christology are the following. First, it emphasizes the unity of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is a sole person, is a one unique being. Jesus Christ cannot be divided into pieces, cannot be torn into pieces. Some parts in Jesus Christ can be discerned, can be theoretically imagined. That is how Cyril of Alexandria described this only theoretical, imaginatory distinction between divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ. The complex unity, where the complexity is only distinguished, not separated from each other, the parts of the complexity. He expressed with the formula one incarnated nature of God Logos. This is a key phrase in his theology, in the theology of Cyril of Alexandria, where he actually comprises the idea that there is divinity and there is humanity, and they exist together as one single being in one person of Jesus Christ. So this is the formula of Cyril of Alexandria, which is central to him, and which became a reason for the division among Eastern Christians, because some Eastern Christians accepted this formula and insisted that this is the only correct formula to speak about Jesus Christ, and other Christians in the East rejected this formula and insisted that this formula is not accurate enough. It's not. It needs to be interpreted in the way that Cyril of Alexandria essentially speaks about two natures, not one nature. And we are going to this point. Cyril of Alexandria, as I said, presented and expressed in the best possible way the Logos Sarx theology, Christology, theology about Jesus Christ. We can depict this theology as a circle with Cyril of Alexandria located in the center of this circle. Okay? A slightly more different theology was articulated in the West. And the key figure in this articulation was Pope Leo of Rome. He lived, a generation a bit later than Cyril of Alexandria. They were actually living together, but Pope Leo was a bit younger. Pope Leo accepted the Antiochian Logos Anthropos Christology, which emphasized the fullness of humanity in Jesus Christ. And he became a central figure in this Logos Anthropos Christology. In most parts, they coincide with each other. They actually belong to the same doctrine. There are no differences between them, and they constituted orthodoxy for both the West and the East. However, some marginal, extremal parts of these Christologies produced what was identified as heresy. The marginal part of Logos Sarx Christology constituted what was called monophysitism. Monophysitism is an insistence on oneness of the nature of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ is one single nature, but not in the sense as Cyril of Alexandria described it, but in the sense that the human part of Jesus Christ mutated, transformed to something different, something which is not human anymore, which is a kind of demi-divine, This teaching was expressed by Eutychius, who lived in Constantinople, and hence this doctrine is also called Eutychianism. Eutychius compared the incarnation with a drop of vinegar being dissolved in the ocean of water. He described in this way how God became incarnate, that humanity that was taken by God in the person of Jesus Christ just dissolved in this ocean of divinity, right? And this humanity became something different, alienated from its original state. This was different from what Cyril of Alexandria told, because for Cyril, even though he was talking about one single nature that combined divinity and humanity, for him, both divinity and humanity remain the same, unalienated, unchangeable. That is the difference between Cyril and Eutychianism. Okay? For Eutychius and for his followers, which were condemned as heretics, the divinity of Jesus Christ absorbed, dissolved in itself the human component. Okay? For Cyril of Alexandria, the human component remained unchanged. Okay? On the other margin of this scheme, there was Nestorianism, which we have already considered. Nestorianism was teaching about two subjects in Jesus Christ. Nestorianism so radically insisted on two natures in Jesus Christ, that these two natures constituted not just natures, commonalities in Jesus Christ, like humanity and divinity, but actually two different subjects. A divine subject, a divine me, and a human me in Jesus Christ. This margin was also condemned as heresy. So in the center, there is an orthodoxy which was common for the East and for the West. And the two orthodoxies, so to say, the Eastern and the Western, coincided with each other. But their centers were slightly different, were slightly remote from each other. In the center of the Eastern Orthodoxy is Cyril of Alexandria. In the center of the Western Orthodoxy about Jesus Christ was Leo of Rome. They were both fully acceptable in the East and in the West. But the accents were slightly different. It doesn't mean that they were actually contradicting each other. They were not contradicting each other. They were speaking different languages. The language of Logos Sarx, the language which featured flesh as a word denoting, describing the human side of Jesus Christ. And the word anthropos, man, as denoting the human side of Jesus Christ, which was more common. This wording was more common in the West. Is this understandable? Okay. Yes, please.
So, but for all practical purposes, they're pretty much the same?
Yes. Yes. And actually, they became integrated to each other, synthesized these two languages in the wording of the council, which happened just 20 years after Ephesus, the Council of Chalcedon, in the year 451. We have already visited this council several times, and we have identified it as a central event in the development of Christology and in the development in the life of the Eastern Church during the first millennium. The Council of Chalcedon was synthetic. It brought together two languages, the language of Cyril of Alexandria and the language of Leo of Rome, who actually wrote to that council. And he proposed his own language for the council to be elaborated upon and to be accepted. And so So it happened. So the two languages were kind of blended together, and they produced the definition of the council, the horus of the council, which became normative, a normative language for both the Eastern and the Western Church, what we call now Orthodox and Catholic Church. So both churches stay together in upholding this council. Okay. The structure of the definition of this council regarding Jesus Christ is very similar to the structure of any Christological deliberation beginning from the Gospels, from the Apostolic era. Remember, every deliberation about Jesus Christ began with the statement about the unity of Jesus Christ. The unity of the personality of Jesus Christ as a single alive being. Then it continues with distinctions between different sides of the same personality, the human and the divine, the individual and the common. The individual personality of Jesus Christ and two natures which were common to God and to the rest of the humankind. And every such statement ended with a reaffirmation of unity of Jesus Christ. So the Council of Chalcedon followed this pattern. It began with the stating of that Jesus Christ is one and the same Christ. This was the language of Cyril of Alexandria. It went back to Irenaeus of Lyon in the 2nd century. It was a common language, which was pertinent to the East, but was also accepted in the West. Then the council went to distinguishing humanity and divinity in Jesus Christ. And in this distinguishing, the council, owing to Pope Leo, owing to the Western insistence on the fullness of humanity in Jesus Christ, accepted, adopted, and implemented the language of two natures in Jesus Christ. The council actually uttered its faith in the language of two natures. And the council also praised the unity of the two natures in a very interesting way, which became kind of formula. The council defined that the divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ are united unconfusedly, unchangeably, indivisibly, and inseparably. So it's like the formula 1 + 1 + 1 = 1 in the Trinity. The same formula applies to the natures of Jesus Christ, that one nature of Jesus Christ plus another nature of Jesus Christ equal one Jesus Christ. Another strange formula. It's not mathematics, it's theology. That's why formulas work differently here. And the final formula of the unity of divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ was that Jesus Christ is one hypostasis in two natures. One hypostasis as a one single complete being, alive being of Jesus Christ. That's what hypostasis means. Hypostasis means a concrete being. And this concrete being exists in two natures, which means that this complete being of Jesus Christ is concrete for the divinity and humanity. The divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ are concrete. They do exist in a singular way, in the way of a single hypostasis of Jesus Christ. So this is basically the final formula of Chalcedon. Any questions so far? This is clear. Yes.
So why did they have this council again? Was it so that they could combine both ideas?
Yes, because there were arguments about how to understand Cyril of Alexandria. Cyril of Alexandria was a very important figure. So this council essentially wanted to interpret the authoritative figure of Jesus of Cyril of Alexandria. The council wanted to explicate what Cyril of Alexandria meant by his formulas. The council also dealt with the issue of Eutychianism, of Eutychius. Remember, with this margin of Christology. So Chalcedon actually addressed this area, okay? And Chalcedon wanted to make it clear that this area does not belong to the Orthodox, to the common orthodoxy of the East and of the West. The council before Chalcedon, 20 years before Chalcedon, remember it was the council in Ephesus in 431, addressed this area. And the council of Chalcedon essentially identified this area as not belonging to Orthodoxy. Yeah. The council of Chalcedon, 20 years later, addressed this area. And identify this area as dangerous, as not Orthodox. Okay? Clear? What we are dealing with is a chain of interpretation. Even though people at the time did not know about hermeneutics is a new phenomenon, modern phenomenon, they nevertheless used some elements of hermeneutics. They tried to clarify what the authorities were talking about. The ultimate authority for both East and West was Cyril of Alexandria, the key figure. Then Chalcedon essentially tried to interpret Cyril of Alexandria. And Chalcedon, the Council of Chalcedon became a hermeneutical instrument to explicate the ideas of Cyril of Alexandria. Then another group of the followers of Cyril of Alexandria disagreed with this interpretation, with the interpretation of Chalcedon. This group, therefore, opposed the council. What we have here are two different interpretations of the same authority. For both these groups, Cyril was the absolute authority. No one could doubt that he was really expressing, he was speaking with the Holy Spirit, expressing the truth about Jesus Christ. But they disagreed about how to interpret Cyril of Alexandria. So the Council of Chalcedon, under the influence of the West, of the Pope of Rome, interpreted the language of Cyril of Alexandria in the terms of two natures. This group of people, of the disciples of Cyril, they disagreed with this interpretation, and they said, no, we can use only the language of Cyril of Alexandria. We can speak about Jesus Christ only in the terms of one single nature. And they actually disagreed to the extent that they decided to split. That's how the schism, the first great schism in the Eastern Church happened. In this group, in this hermeneutical group, so to say, two large churches of the Christian world found themselves, the Church of Rome and the Church of Constantinople. In this group, two other churches, great churches of the Christian world, found themselves, the Church of Alexandria and the Church of Antioch. And the protagonists of this group became the Archbishop of Alexandria, Dioscorus, who succeeded Cyril of Alexandria, actually, and the Archbishop of Antioch, Severus. They created a movement against the Chalcedon, and this movement is called therefore anti-Chalcedonian. This movement developed to a system of churches which we now know as Oriental churches. The churches which include the Coptic Church, the Syriac Church, the Ethiopian Church, Armenian Church, and some other some divisions within this group. Okay. These Christians lived on the Asian side of the Roman Empire, the side which was often invaded first by Persians and later by the Arabs. And those people who disagreed with the Chalcedon, which in turn was supported by the state officially, so Chalcedon became an official theology of the Roman Empire. And those people who disagreed with the Chalcedon disagreed therefore with the official policies of the Roman Empire. And their dissent against the Roman Empire meant that they became vulnerable to the invaders. They actually, most of them collaborated with the invaders. And this became a major political problem for the Roman Empire. And after the Chalcedon, every single Roman emperor who resided in Constantinople wanted to bring those people in unity, back in unity with the Chalcedonian Church. That's how a reconciliatory movement of Neo-Chalcedonianism emerged in the 5th century. In the 6th century, beginning of the 6th century. The Neo-Chalcedonian movement was supported at its initial form by the Emperor Justinian. Remember, one of the greatest Byzantine emperors. Well, we call them Byzantine, they were Roman actual emperors. They considered themselves Romans, but technically we call them Byzantine. So Justinian was behind this movement. And the movement tried to reconcile, to approach this group. And this movement was elaborated several formulas that would be reconciliatory, would be acceptable for this group, and simultaneously all the followers of Chalcedon. This movement suggested that we cannot use exclusively the language of two natures. And we also cannot use exclusively the language of one nature, Jesus Christ. We can use both languages. It means that when we speak about Jesus Christ, we can talk simultaneously about Him as one nature and two natures. Because it depends how we interpret these languages. Okay? That was the basic idea of Neo-Chalcedonianism. And this idea was confirmed at the 5th Ecumenical Council held in Constantinople in the year 553. Is this clear? In the 7th century, an emperor who tried to imitate Justinian, his name was Heraclius. This is the depiction of him that we have on a coin. Heraclius, he went further, and in his attempt to reconcile the non-Chalcedonian groups with the Chalcedonian churches, he invented a formula which would also satisfy the Nestorians. Remember, the Nestorians were believing in two separate subjects of Jesus Christ. And quite coincidentally, not quite logically, but they called the unifying factor, the point point where the two subjects in Jesus Christ touch each other, they call this point will, one single will of Jesus Christ. And this was the idea of Heraclius, that what if we suggest a formula, a Christological formula, which would satisfy all the groups that separated from each other. And his formula was essentially this one, that Jesus Christ is a single subject. He has two natures, but because of this single subject, the activity or energia in Greek and will are single. This part of the formula would satisfy the Chalcedonians. This part of the formula would satisfy the non-Chalcedonians. And this part of the formula would satisfy the Nestorians. So it was a kind of ideal formula. It was eclectic. The theologians in his time tried to connect these points to prove that these connections are logical. But the initial idea was political, to bring different groups of decent Christians together on the basis of one synthetic theological formula. Well, this formula didn't work because many people were not convinced that there is a direct connection between these two things. And instead, a new theology was developed in rejection of this theology. This theology was developed by Maximus the Confessor, probably the most famous theologian of the first millennium in the Eastern Christianity. He was also a Western theologian because he spent quite a lot of time in Northern Africa, in Catholic and in Rome. And his friend was Pope Martin of Rome. Together with Martin, Maximus were tried and were exiled and died in exile for the defense of this formula, which was alternative to the monothelite formula. And their theology were confirmed by the Sixth Ecumenical Council held in Constantinople in the year 686-81. They insisted that, yes, Jesus Christ is a single subject. He has two natures. But because of the natures, he has two natures. He has two energies, two activities, and two wills. The energies and the wills belong to the natures, not to the subject. Therefore, they are two. This formula looks like scholastic, well, so what? But it had some interesting implications, which we will arrive right now. For now, I should say that this formula was eventually accepted by the Church, both in the East and in the West. And it has become a common formula for the Orthodox Church again, for the Catholic Church, and for the Protestant churches. So this one, not the previous one, not this one. So this formula is heretical, was condemned as heretical, because it implied that the activity and the will of Jesus Christ come from the subject and not from his natures. And this formula was approved as orthodox and accepted commonly in the East and in the West. Therefore, the project of reunification of the dissident groups, Oriental churches, the Church of the East, and the Chalcedonian Church, that Heraclius wanted to implement through his formula didn't work. So this unity didn't happen. So you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I was wondering, so like two natures is the Father and the Son, right?
Yes, it's about the Trinity, yes.
But, so is the Holy Spirit not technically counted as
He is counted as the third person. We'll come there right now,
okay.
but we'll consider it now the difference between the Eastern and the Western Church, the Byzantine and the Roman Church. But the differentiation between these positions happened a bit later than this discussion. So this is only about Jesus Christ. Who and what is Jesus Christ? It's not about the Trinity. All this discussion. Okay? Is this clear, guys? Yes.
In the sixth council, they came together to decide that this was the one that they
Yes,
were.
exactly. The purpose of the sixth council was exactly to confirm this formula and to reject the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just to clarify, so now this is the right formula?
This is the right formula as it is still held by both the churches in the East and in the West. Mhm. Sorry? Yes. Look, theology was very much a part of the state policy. And as we have discussed already, after Justinian, every decision of the church had to be confirmed by the state, had to become a law. And it meant also that when as the state promulgated a law which regulated theological matters, the church had to comply with this law. Therefore, when Heraclius, in the year 639, issued a law, a state law, that confirmed essentially this formula, and Maximus and Pope Martin objected. They said that this formula is not correct. They violated the law. And as a result, they were punished as violators of law, and their punishment was exile. Maximus was exiled to Georgia. He was buried in Georgia, and Martin was exiled to Crimea. Yes?
I have a kind of like unrelated question. I was just wondering, I know that before Christ, like the years are counted like backwards.
Yes,
So
yes.
How did the people count the years like as they were living at that time?
Yes, it depended in which country they lived. Say in the Roman Empire, they counted their years from the foundation of Rome. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, who was responsible for deciding who's being exiled and who's not?
Yes.
And was it?
Yes, they were complicated procedures. The juridical system of the Roman Empire was involved. The systems of the judges essentially tried those people, including those like Maximus or Martin. Sometimes it was a kind of supreme court, which was presided by the emperor himself, because the emperor was regarded the supreme judge also. So the emperor had there was no separation of powers as you know now. The executive, lawmaking, and judging power. All three powers were concentrated in one person of the emperor. Therefore, the emperor was the ultimate judge, but he also was assisted by prosecutors, by advocates. So it was a system which is quite similar, the system of the Roman law, which was quite similar to our system. Even if we take the councils of the church, they imitated the mechanism of judging of in the Roman Empire, even before Christianity. So there were complicated procedures, and procedures mattered a lot. They had to be performed in a correct way. A person who was judged had many chances to be actually relieved from the charges and to be discharged. But in the case of Maximus and Martin, they were judged as criminals, as violent, for the violation of the law that regulated doctrinal theological issues.
So what law were they? What were they doing wrong?
Yes, as I said, there was had been a law issued by the emperor in the year 639. That law was called Peace, and that law regulated the discussion regarding this formula in a certain way, and Maximus and Martin rejected this this discussion, this discourse. And because this discourse was enhanced, enforced by law, they therefore violated the law. So at least the judges decided. Any other question? Yes,
But
please.
later on, the Sixth Council came back and improved it.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
But later on, afterwards, thinking of the single subject two natures, they later improved it.
Yes, exactly. That was the point. That was the point of Heraclius, that he included to this formula the two natures, Chalcedonian language, in order to satisfy the Chalcedonian part. Therefore, every part had to make some compromise. The Chalcedonians who were supposed to compromise to accept this single energy idea. The non-Chalcedonians were anti-Chalcedonians. They were supposed to accept this formula, but they were granted instead this formula as really dear, important for them. And the Nestorians had to buy into this formula, and it was easy to accept for them this formula, but it was harder for them to accept this one. So every part involved had to compromise, had to give up something in order to get to unity with the rest. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay. As I said, these schemes are not just classical because they have political implications. And actually, all these Christological formulas, they had some extra importance because of their political implications. They describe the way how the state, the machinery of the state, of the empire, was functioning. Each formula that we have discussed so far had a political projection, had a certain political model behind it. And those models were about real power, real resources, and they mattered a lot. For instance, let us take theological systems, Christological models, and political models. Some of these political models we have already considered, discussed. So, monophysitism. Monophysitism, what is monophysitism? Yes.
That Christ's divine nature is his only nature and humanity is.
Yes, that's true, exactly. That's exactly was the model which corresponded to the Eusebian vision of the empire. That the empire and the church constituted one single nature, and the church actually dissolved in this political nature of the empire. Then the model of Cyril of Alexandria, which stated that the nature, that the humanity of Jesus Christ remains unchangeable, remains identical to itself, even though it is closely related to the divinity, constitutes one single being with the divinity. This formula corresponded to the Justinian idea of symphony, the normative kind of political model of the Roman Empire, especially after Justinian. The Romans had absolutely the same idea about the relationship between the church and the state as they had about the relationship between divinity and humanity in Jesus Christ. That these are two natures, but they are so closely connected with each other that we only distinguish between them. We don't separate, we cannot separate them. Okay? Then the insistence on the fullness of humanity in Jesus Christ. In the theology of Pope Leo, corresponded to the idea of some kind of loose relationship between the church and the state as it dominated in the West. In the West, they expressed this idea through the theory of two swords, that the Pope has two swords. One is political and another is ecclesial, is theological. These are two different arms of power, so to say, and this corresponded exactly to the Western idea of the unity in Jesus Christ, as it was expressed by Pope Leo. Then monothelitism, it is really an important doctrine that projected itself to a model of power where, yes, there were two natures in Jesus Christ as well as there were two natures of the church and of the state, but these two natures were subsumed by the same will, one will of the emperor. That was the vision of Heraclius, and he actually implemented that vision. He actually acted as if he was actually a single will for both the church and the state. And Nestorianism, which only superficially connected the humanity and divinity in Jesus Christ, it actually implied the modern idea of the wall, separation between the church and the state. And the Nestorians, quite coincidentally, had to implement this model when they were expelled to Persia, to the Persian Empire, remember, and then went further to India, China, and other, Mongolia, and other places, where they had to live with a completely different state, which was not Christian, and there was a natural wall between them and the state. And this wall corresponded exactly to their belief in the separation between the divinity and humanity of Jesus Christ. Is this clear, guys? Does it make sense for you?
The one on the left corresponds to one on the right? Or
Yeah. This is a theological formula, and this is a political formula. And they correspond to each other. Okay. Any questions? So that's why theology mattered a lot in the period of late antiquity, after the modernity, because theology was the language in which political realities expressed themselves and were communicated. Okay. Well, all those controversies, arguments about who and what is Jesus Christ, resulted in the separation between different Christian groups in the East, and primarily they produced what we can call the Great Schism number one, the schism within the Eastern Christianity, the schism between the churches which were in the same place in the East. Actually, this schism had three stages. The first stage was, it happened after the Third Ecumenical Council in Ephesus. It led to the separation between the Ephesian church and the so-called Nestorian church. I presented this as a scheme, speaking very briefly. The Ephesian church believed in one subject of Jesus Christ. The Nestorian church believed in two subjects of Jesus Christ. Then the largest schism happened soon after this one, after the Council of Chalcedon in 451. It led to the separation of two major sees of Christianity. Rome and Constantinople, and Jerusalem was a small, tiny church which united with them, went with them together against the two other major Christian sees in Alexandria and in Antioch. And as we said, this separation was on the ground of interpretation whether Christ had one or two natures. The Macedonian side interpreted this as one hypostasis in two natures, interpreted the unity of Jesus Christ, and the Oriental churches interpreted the unity of Jesus Christ as one nature. And the last addition to this schism, which occurred because, well, the emperors tried to reconcile these groups. This actually, their attempts to reconcile these groups led to new schisms. And this one happened after the Sixth Ecumenical Council, when the Diophilite Church separated from the Monophyllite Church. This was actually a minority, a tiny minority, which called itself Maronite Church. Maronites still exist. Approximately in the 12th century, they were united with Rome, and the Maronite groups are still in unity with Rome. They constitute the majority of the Christian minority in the Lebanon, even now. And they live also in Cyprus and in some other places in the Middle East. And they also have quite a big diaspora in this country.